Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
Well, we're going to talk about the local elections 2019. It's been a very exciting time politically for people that like politics and for people involved in politics. And of course, we're also going to talk about the European elections. So go ahead there.
That's right. And then there was the referendum on the shortening the period for people. Hello, Oliver, by the way. The people that get divorced because the marriage is not working out normally had to be, I think, 4 years. Give them a chance to perhaps rethink their situation. Perhaps they, if you rush in, it's often regretful, and the preparation is nearly more important than the event itself at times. But in any event, this referendum was to shorten the period of 4 years to, I think, 2 years or a year, something like that, and perhaps in due course, I suppose, no waiting time if you can get a divorce if you want it. And the business of blame doesn't come into the picture. It's not the divorce is not the reporting the other person to be because of a problem. It could be just that one person wants a divorce because the person they're married to, for some reason that they feel didn't meet their expectations. So you could have high expectations of the, say, the beloved in the beginning, and after a bit,
Things go a bit haywire.
Something else. I think if they could go slow in the initial stages, but of course we live in modern times, so the sort of events and values that took place perhaps years ago are replaced now by different opinions and attitudes. So that's about the divorce referendum. By the way, I think that was passed and unanimously, because obviously a lot of the Irish people seem to take the view that marriage is a temporary affair to be suspended on the whim of whatever the individual feels at the end of the day, because marriage is a compromise. You've got to forget about yourself in some ways and think of the other person, but sometimes it only works one way. The other party doesn't think the same. So, okay, very well, you think of that, but if the other person doesn't think it, you're up a gum tree. And now about the election, it was quite involved and enthusiastic, and a lot of people, in some ways I had a bit of sympathy for the various people going for the local election, and indeed I suppose for the European election, because they seem to be out from morning to night and putting up posters and visiting homes that they mightn't visit in a month of wet Sundays in the normal course of events, but they were having to put a smile on their faces and, I suppose, sturdy shoes, because they did a lot of walking. And of course, the country was festooned, if you like to use the word. I like to use the word festooned because it is a sort of a carnival atmosphere when you see all the posters fluttering in the breeze. And on the side of the road, and sometimes a big one, with 2 or 3 individuals all smiling and grinning. Not too many of them sour faces, funny enough. Oh, looking usually with their teeth open and a big smile on their face. I suppose at least enthusiastic they looked. So one sympathised with them because they couldn't all win. They entered the race and put their names on the line and visited people, and they say, yes, we'll give you number 1. And as soon as we go out the door, they say, you will get number 1, you won't get number 1 from me, because there's homes that apparently voted Fianna Fáil down the years and voted Fine Gael, and some voted Labour all the years, and some voted in latter years Sinn Féin. Because don't forget, Sinn Féin was a name of a party that at the foundation of the state, and then they changed their names to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and all the rest of it. So it was a very interesting time. Now, but the end result, after all the foot slapping and all the rest of it, knocking on doors and grinning from ear to ear, the upshot was that they now are turned around, and some of them have had to lick their wounds because they haven't been elected. others have, and I think on the local elections, if one takes a test the wind, Fianna Fáil, generally speaking, held their own in the local elections and perhaps improved a bit. So they can take credit from that. They're not punch drunk yet. And but in the European elections, that seemed to be quite open, and there was a lot of candidates in that race. Now, some of them were first at the wrong end of the count, towards the bottom and close to it. But nonetheless, they togged out and went for the election. Unfortunately, they didn't succeed, and their transfers helped other ones, because I think one of the ones anyway, was the one in the Ulster Connacht. There was 14 counts in the Ulster Connacht constituency. There was electing four European MEPs, members of the European Parliament, and there was a few outgoing. There was the only one that wasn't going forward was Mary Harland, who was an independent from Mayo. She wasn't going, so there was a good few candidates in with a good chance, and one was Casey.
Peter Casey.
Peter Casey. He was in with a good chance. Now, somebody mentioned that he didn't do himself any favours on a debate that they had on RTE the week of the competition. The election. And whereas Luke Ming Flanagan and Mairead McGuinness come across as people that had experience or something that come across better.
The thing about Peter Casey is he's probably seen as being controversial.
That could be.
I mean, they're seen that way. Maybe people think that you don't have much substance. Maybe that.
Well, there would be that, and I think, as I say, in the debate, he didn't acquit himself as good as he could, because when you're like, he did have some publicity, because he did well in the presidential election, coming from 3% to 20%. So there was a core of people there that would support his views. Now, so therefore, you then at the debate, I think there was 8, I believe, valid, and I didn't see it, but I was told that he didn't acquit himself as well. He seemed to be a bit over talking or whatever it was, or interrupting or that, and it's not good. Of course, it's typical of the RTE state broadcaster to sort of have such a, what I call a ridiculous debate with so many people, candidates. Any responsible TV organisation would have presented maybe 4 candidates over the period of the previous month or 6 weeks, whenever it was announced, so as there could be a proper debate with those that were standing, and issues could be debated on what they stood for. But have 8 candidates of various hues and a debate, all trying to jockey for position, and I believe the chairman wasn't up to the task either. So it's unsatisfying. I didn't see it, thanks for the goodness, because I like a good debate on the TV, but not something that's just a shouting match. And I believe it was something like that. So I think Mr. Casey didn't, those people that might have been looking at it, it could have affected them. But you're quite right, he could have been perceived in that, and though he come 5th, if there was 5 seats he was in. I didn't get enough transfers. He did pretty good in the number 1s, but he didn't get enough transfers, because I think when push comes to shove, this country still has this question of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. They seem to go out canvassing as if like it's their lives depend on it. And the feeling I had in my visit, I was in the Western Water for a few days, and I enjoyed the visit to that neck of the woods. But I learned a few things, because you learn sometimes more when you're further away from the city. And quite frankly, I found him a bit, what's the word, callous in some ways.
You found who?
The Fine Gael people that they got 2 MEPs, and out of 4 they got 2 MEPs. McGuinness was elected on the first count, and then this other one that they had, a farmer, Miss Ireland, who I think eventually became a person that wasn't, we say, a man or a woman, they would be the LBGT or K or whatever it is. So she was elected, I think, and Luke Ming Flanagan come in at the end, so she must have beaten him. And I think Carty, the Sinn Féin, was re-elected, but bringing up the rear, I don't know which of them was bringing up the rear, but they were the 4 ones then elected. And so, if you like, the new one replacing Mary Harlan was this other lady that is not McGuinness, lady or whatever. And then I think Fianna Fáil didn't do so well. Brendan Smith, the former Minister for Agriculture of Fianna Fáil, a very strong man, a good man, I think, for Fianna Fáil, but he had a running mate, and I think that affected him before, and they haven't learned from that. And so, if he had stood on his own, he might have done good. He would have done good. But that's it. Post-mortems, these things come in, but it's who wins counts. And in the local elections, by the way, in Kerry, 2 new Healy Rays have come into the Kerry County Council, and that seems to be a family that is different than other parts. The Healy Rays are a force to be reckoned with, and they come from a staunch Catholic conservative background, much the same in the footsteps of the famous liberator Daniel O'Connell of lovely fame, that brought Catholic emancipation to Ireland in a very peaceful way, non-violent. He witnessed the French Revolution, and he learned from that it was just mob rule is very dangerous. So that's what the Healy raised. So all in all, the European election, a Green Party was in Dublin, a member of the Green Party. So, and Green candidates in the local elections gained seats. So now I think the Prime Minister teaching this country, Mr. Barriger, they didn't do that well in the local elections. They lost seats. So he claims now that as a result of that, they'll be looking at the climate change. He never takes a defeat as lessons to be learned. He takes some other narrative from it, and it doesn't distinguish the fact that they're kind of kicking it behind in the local elections, which normally doesn't augur well for a general election. But I think they have this business of a certain core vote, and proportionally in the European elections they did far better than Fianna Fáil and far better than Labour. So they'd be feeling fairly satisfied overall. So that's the result of the elections, and it was interesting with the people and the number of posters, and especially in Dublin. I'm sure people must have got dizzy, because oftentimes there were several posters on the one poll.
That's right, yeah. There was. I never seen so many posters.
I wonder, was there a contractor doing the job, like, in other words, because if there was 7 different individuals getting up on ladders and putting up posters, must have been hard going. They must have had to queue up to get their ladder, to get their poster up.
Hey, this thing, what I noticed is some candidates, like they put up their posters on a fence, and you'd have 5 posters of the same candidate. And that's no use. What's that about?
No. And then some poor candidates had very little posters. I don't think I saw any posters for Peter Casey, or the other man, the Renewal candidate. He didn't come last, but he polled down the votes. But I don't know where. I didn't now look at where the votes went to afterwards. But I'd say they went all over the place. So it would be very hard to predict, but it's the end result that counts. if the government party, who has brought in fairly divisive type social issues by way of marriage referendum that they brought in, and by way of the abortion referendum that they brought in, and then did away with the blasphemy, and now they've lowered the business of divorce, so they're not encouraging marriage as far as I can see in that area. So, and then with what they're proposing by way of education in schools. So the media, of course, don't highlight these things, and it's just a conservative element that does, and nobody seems to be listening to us, or listening to conservatism. So perhaps we have to learn to sort of swim in a different way, get our points across in a more, shall we say, jolly way if possible.
Absolutely. In terms of the past, what do you consider to be a very exciting time in general elections? Was there any particular general election or a local election or a European election that sticks out in your mind?
Well, they were very predictable some years ago. There was generally 4 Fine Gael, 4 Fianna Fáil, or 4 Fianna Fáil and 3 Fine Gael, and there might be a Labour, and there might be something else.
In Europe now, or where?
I'm talking about the European there. In the local elections in Dublin, Fianna Fáil did very poorly. They've done well this time. They've got a lot of councillors elected.
Did Fianna Fáil always do well, or did they do badly in Dublin?
They did badly in Dublin.
Always? Was that a kind of a tradition?
Well, but no, they did all right. They got enough one time, because Bertie Ahern one time was Lord Mayor of Dublin. And so was a lad called Ben Briscoe, the first Jewish Lord Mayor of Dublin. And it got great credit in the US because it wasn't that long after the Second World War when so many Jewish people, 6 million, and were butchered and sent to concentration camps by the Germans. And likewise, there was 500,000 Catholics or more, including priests. I think a third of the priests from Poland were brought into death camps by the Germans. And so now why I'm saying that is that the German ruling party that allowed 1 million young Muslim men to enter the country, and which caused such trouble, that party has done very poorly in the European elections abroad. Marie Le Pen, the Conservative Party in France, they call it some name, the media does, because the media are very quick to put labels on parties that are actually, they call them extreme or this, that, or the other, right wing, because they seem to have a wish for a middle of the road type of thing. But people do vote for other parties that mirror their views. In Britain, Brexit Party under Nigel Farage, that was not heard of. They are the majority in that country. So people have voted for parties that are sort of trying to respect the citizens of the countries that they're in. They don't want to be flooded with a whole heap of people from other jurisdictions that and other cultures that find it very difficult to integrate with the host country. So the former Chancellor Merkel in Germany has lost out, and she's now a thing of the past, and I think in other countries it's the same thing. Except this country bucked the trend in some ways. There have been some independence. There is a change here, so there's always liable to be a change, because one never can predict too accurately. If the media in this country is in the pocket of the kind of secular type government that we have now, it sort of informs the people because they don't hear any other narrative. And so I suppose the people that's of a conservative frame of mind might need to sort of develop a strategy that they can get their point across. Very difficult when it's controlled in such a way. The conservative independent type voice that might question some of the policies that are being pursued are not heard. That's the one, I suppose, hope that some of the parties that have been elected might represent those views, although I have my doubts. I cannot think of any what I call pro-life, the views, the conservative views that one would like to see representative, and I have a feeling that they're not representative, like anything like the percentage of people in the country that would like to support. You know, that's the worry about this country, and I'm not sure if it's reciprocated in other countries. I think we're a bit unique here because we do have a media that's not as objective as we would like.
Okay. What would you consider an exciting time, an exciting year in politics? And the other question I have for you is, were you always interested in politics as a young person?
I was, because the funny thing is, I certainly was, because I remember years ago there was a fella called Sherwin, I think. He was an independent, and I forget how he got in. But I remember me and some others, must have been of like mind at the time, helping him to put things into envelopes, I suppose going to houses. And that must have been the way they'd done it. Now they have leaflets that goes into your house by the post, but it must have been done some other way, and we're putting into envelopes. So we helped him. He was independent, so I must have had a leaning towards the person that was the underdog, or something like that, because I certainly remember doing that. I don't remember helping any Fianna Fáil candidate or any Fine Gael or any Labour. It was the sort of the guy that was standing up for issues that were relevant, because at the time that I'm talking about, there was a lot of unemployment. The unemployment rate was about 13%, even though there was a lot of businesses.
13%, what year would you be talking about?
I'm talking about the late 50s, early 60s. Sure, that's the time when there was 50,000 Irish people going over to England, and there's been programmes done about them, by the way, recently, about what they have to put up with, and that. A marvellous programme. I can't think now really where I saw it. It's only in the past couple of weeks, they sort of when they worked for the various Irish building companies, their insurance wasn't paid. They were getting money, and then as they got older, then suddenly they weren't entitled to all the things that they should have been entitled to. But various voluntary organisations has come to their aid, and they're getting help because they did contribute a lot to the building up of Britain. And now they're cast by the wayside, and I think we don't hear enough of the narrative about what they contributed or anything. The memory, from what I could see in my visit to the west of Ireland and what have you, is very short, and they're very self-centred, I think, and they're self-satisfied, and in some ways they're not as open as they were when I was younger. You were open to sort of seeing that kind of good was being done. Now there's things being done, and this I pointed out to two parties that I was travelling with that were from the Fine Gael side, and even though these were, I think, relevant, it's extraordinary how they managed to defend them.
Just wonder, John, you said some earlier on in the beginning of the interview there, you were talking about Sinn Féin and that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are offshoots of that, of the party. Is that the case?
Of what you say?
That the origins are Sinn Féin. So maybe you wanted to describe that for anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah, no, that's right. But the Sinn Féin were parties at the foundation state. They got all the votes, and when there was an election, and because it would, there was really an emphasis on trying to get independence for Ireland. It's a narrative that's often told from a certain angle, but there's more to it than what the narrative is. There's an awful lot more to it, and to sort of distinguish it in the real sense of the word. It's funny enough, I found some of that attitude when I was in the West, that aspect of our history is not adequately covered, and covered in a way that gives you a clue as to how it developed and come on. Sometimes they pick out events, but that doesn't give the picture either, because people have to be brought along. Now, if I was to describe the Irish electorate scene, or the Irish vote, I think it's very unpredictable, because if you have a pliant media and in the TV, radio, both state and independent, how are you going to get another opinion across that's well thought out? The media seems to just react knee-jerk. There seems to be no development of a cohesive sort of policies that would lift everybody up and not just describe issues, antisocial behaviour and this, that and the other. If you do the groundwork properly, all these things can be mitigated or dealt with properly. But there seems to me at times, because of the lack of this uniformity around the secular sort of an agenda, there isn't the other issues debated and analysed and dealt with effectively as they should be.
Absolutely. I wonder, if you go back to the early 1900s, I don't know anything about politics around that time, but you said there Sinn Féin, was there other parties?
There was the Land League, for example. When I was in Mayo there, I knew where it was. Michael Davitt, the famous Land League man, farmers didn't have their rights for their land, and he managed to get that in those times. So there was a lot of very good men that got kind of justice, because you see, you just had the few getting all this. And by the way, I visited a house in where was it? It must have been at the museum. Fitzgerald's had it, that there were relatives of the Earls of Kildare from Kilkenny, or the Dukes, or wherever they were. But when the agent was collecting the rent from these poor devils, I saw like the hut, a kind of a hut with no windows in it, and a chimney going through the roof, no windows, and several children could be in that house, the mother and father, and the very nothing that you could call anyways comfort. And they'd have to pay rent for half an acre, and this business, all they could do was try to grow a few potatoes and things, and they'd be up, and there was the agent that was sitting at a desk, and they'd be coming in trying to, maybe they mightn't have the money because they had nothing. And Fitzgerald and the owner, there was a sort of like a library, but it was a false door, and he'd be in listening. There was an example of it. Now, I think that was replicated all around the country at the time. So our ancestors had a terrible time. It's actually doesn't bear thinking about, but it should be spoken about. And if we come from that background, then there should be a continuation of that kind of struggle and that resilience that our ancestors had, and had to contend with such difficulties in their lives, and were put upon, not alone by way of being denied the practice of their religion, but even denied some modicum of comfort in their daily lives. It was just drudgery at the worst order, in the worst conditions of managing that. We don't hear enough about it, but funny enough, when you visit places, the history is there.
Okay. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Oliver.